Thanks so much, Jen, and great to see everybody here. I'll begin by acknowledging we're on the territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh people, and reflect on the fact that housing solutions are going to involve strong partnerships with Indigenous people across the province, and I know there are leaders here from Indigenous housing as well. It's great to be here in Vancouver with so many leaders around housing. I know there are folks from industry here. I've seen nonprofit leaders, and I certainly know there are strong local government representatives here today. I have heard great feedback from my colleagues who have been here, the Minister for Housing, Rolly Russell, who's here, talking about rural housing issues, and the discussions and the solutions that have been put forward. And I am really honored and appreciate the invitation to speak to you about the massive challenge that we face in our province in relation to housing. Everyone in this room knows that BC is one of the most sought-after places in the world to live. We have a strong economy, we have good public services, and thriving local communities that many of you represent, and of course also natural beauty. We're very fortunate to live here. But we also know the shadow side of that, which is that finding an affordable place to live in our province is a profound challenge. And in fact, such a serious challenge that it has rightly been described as a crisis. There are too many people in their 20s and 30s that are still living at home, too many seniors who can't find a place that they can afford to live. You can ask anyone who's been through Craigslist, looking at rental housing listings, who's gone to open houses, trying to find a way to get into the housing market. It's tough out there, and it's even tough for people who earn a decent income to find a place to live. Speaking of seniors, I had a renters town hall last night. I met with a woman who is a pillar of her community, volunteers on a number of boards, works at a local school. She's a senior. And she said, I never thought I'd find myself in this position. She's been renting her whole life. She got notice from her landlord that she was going to be evicted for landlord use. The landlord allegedly is going to move a family member in. And she's looking for a place to live and can't find a place she can afford in the community where she's worked and helped build for her entire life. A press event last week to launch our housing strategy. There was a young woman named Bridget who spoke about the fact that she and her partner have been looking for a place where they can live to start their family, and they can't afford to move. And she feels she's going to miss out on the opportunity potentially to be a mom, and that they can't start their family life because they can't find appropriate housing. The crisis is really touching people in every corner of our province. There's no one area that is untouched by this. It's actually holding back our entire provincial economy. I'm sure you've heard, I know I have, from businesses looking for workers. They find someone who wants to take the job, and that person looks at the housing market and says, I'm sorry, I can't do it. My own family, my wife in residency for medical school was going to go up and be a doctor in the health clinic in Port McNeill. Our family almost had to cancel going there because we were unable to find housing. Finally, we found a place. It was on a short-term rental site, and we asked the owner to take it off and to rent to us for a longer period of time. But the issue of healthcare so closely tied to the issue of housing. So how did we get here? I think that many of you in this room, and I do feel sometimes when I'm speaking to a housing group, I've worked with many of you in many different capacities. I feel like I'm saying the things that we all know, but I want to say them out loud because it's important that people understand how we got here. We did have a housing market here in the province that did not see housing as, first of all, a place for people to live. It was the free market system that prioritized, through negligence, frankly, the interests of investors and speculators over homes for people to live. People used that crisis that was manufactured to make money through flipping homes, for example, driving up the cost of homes for everyone else, driving families out of neighborhoods, and resulting in tens of thousands of vacant units. As housing was built, it wasn't for people, it was for investors. At the exact same time, the provincial and the federal governments stopped building affordable housing. And many of you in this room warned policymakers. They said this day would come when there would be a reckoning if we didn't start building affordable housing, if we didn't get back in the business of building affordable housing. Well, of course, we're here now, and many of you in local governments have been left to pick up the pieces. As demand for housing rose, supply did not keep up. When we formed government, we started to turn things around. We brought in the speculation and vacancy tax. 20,000 units in Metro Vancouver alone that were previously vacant came back onto the housing market as rental housing. We capped rent increases. We banned illegal rent evictions to protect vulnerable renters. And we started to build affordable housing in this province again. We have, right now, 21,000 units of housing in construction, in development, in front of many of your city councils for approval. 42,000 families, individuals in our province are now housed because of our government's policies and because of the homes we built together that wouldn't have been housed otherwise. But wow, we have a lot more work to do. Thanks to, it's really, and I want to really underline this because it's important for you to hear it from me. I know that the reason why we've made progress, where we have made progress, is because of partnerships with the people in this room, with local governments. This is really important for you to understand because we have to do even more together. Many challenges that we face today were not challenges when we formed government in 2017. High interest rates, global inflation, supply chain issues, labor availability issues have brought new challenges. And at this time, we know that despite those challenges, we have to bring on even more homes even faster. So since becoming Premier, I've really wanted us, and you'll see with our housing plan, to take our housing actions to the next level. And we can only do it in partnership with you. We have sought to take every opportunity to find the housing that's available and get it open for people. So doing challenging things like telling stratas that the restrictions on rental housing that leave units vacant in those buildings, that they can't put those restrictions on anymore. Those units have to be rented. We need housing for people now. I know you've heard me concerned about the length of permitting time at local government levels for new housing, but the finger points back at us too. So we have a new permitting strategy at the provincial government. We've brought on significant new staff to work through the backlog at our level, but also to help redesign the permitting process so that it makes sense, it works quickly. There's so many areas of provincial government that touch on housing approval permit times. We're working with you to set targets for delivering housing to respond to our population growth. We sent $1 billion to local governments for your self-directed priorities. To respond to the growth that you're seeing in your communities. Not prescriptive, but for you to decide where you needed support to respond to growth. We want you to build the community centers, build the trails, build the sports fields, build the pipes, build the things that you need for your community to grow. We're acting to protect renters from profiteers. A new $500 million rental protection fund to have nonprofits buy buildings, affordable rental housing buildings, to keep them affordable for the long term, and when they're redeveloped, to protect tenants, to make sure that those tenants are protected and we add even more affordable housing going forward, a permanent legacy of affordable housing in our province. Now, I know it's been a topic of discussion here. Earlier this week, we released our Homes for People plan, and you likely heard Minister Kahlon go over it in some detail, but just quickly, the four main pillars in the plan: unlocking more homes faster in the province, family-friendly neighborhoods with housing that people can actually afford and is desperately needed. We've talked about missing middle, gentle density. This is that kind of housing: duplexes, triplexes, row houses. Ones that have room for families, for people with kids and pets, but also for seniors to be able to stay in place in their communities, to age in place in their communities with dignity. Homes close to transit, schools, jobs, and local businesses. Our plan will create a lot of these middle-class homes in partnership with you. Together, by changing these zoning rules, by speeding up permitting, reducing red tape, and increasing incentives, we're going to create a lot more housing both for purchase and for rent. I will say, I am really proud of, and I think it's necessary, that we have a standard in our province that if you have in your home a building code compliant basement suite, secondary suite, that you have to be allowed to rent it out in our province, that is a legal thing for you to do. So we're going to say that legal, building code compliant secondary suites must be allowed to be rented out across the province. We are in a housing crisis. Second, we're going to deliver better, more affordable homes. We're going to build thousands of units of social housing and on-campus housing for students. For those of you with a post-secondary institution in your neighborhood, in your community, we know that many of them are taking on many more students that are looking for housing to take pressure off the rental housing market. We'll be building more student housing. We're partnering with Indigenous communities and with the co-op housing sector to build more homes as well. We're going to be providing supports for those with the greatest housing needs, certainly for those experiencing homelessness, more complex care housing, with medical-like supports in buildings so that people are successful in housing. And then finally, we're going to address toxic demand that's in the housing market that's impacting the availability of housing. Families should not be bidding against someone who is buying a home for the purpose of flipping it a few months later to make a profit. Homes are for people first, and we're going to prioritize that by taking the profits away from flipping homes through a new flipping tax. And we're also going to work with you. Thank you very much to UBCM for the work on the short-term rental recommendations to us. That work is very advanced in the Ministry of Housing, based on your recommendations to us, so we can support you in finding that balance. Some communities needing those short-term rentals to drive tourism, but also needing housing for the tourist workers that help support that part of your economy as well. I think everybody in this room understands, in fact, I know you all understand, that a home is foundational to the basics of life. It's more than 4 walls and a roof. It's where you build your family, it's where you build your life, it's where you find your independence as a young person, it's where you live your years with dignity as a senior. Homes are also foundational to local governments who want to build vibrant communities, strong local economies. You need people to help do that. Tackling the housing crisis is going to take all of us working together in partnership, and I couldn't have been happier, I couldn't have described better the work that we need to do than you did in describing the summit as Housing BC Together. That is exactly what we need to do. I want to thank UBCM for your leadership in this work, and I want to thank particularly President Ford for, among other things, sending out a letter recently to municipalities, regional districts, asking you to identify property that you may have available for us to build affordable, attainable middle-income housing on across the province. I urge you to work with your local councils, work with your staff on identifying that property. That inventory will be essential for us in the work that we have to do ahead. I think at the end of the day, when we look at what we came through in the pandemic, if we learned one lesson from that, it's that we can do so much more together than we can on our own. Together, we got shots into arms. When we faced the atmospheric rivers, we got highways opened, reopened, rebuilt in record time. We kept schools open to support kids. We built the strongest post-pandemic recovery in Canada, all together. And if we keep working together in this way, if we learn our lessons that we picked up through the pandemic, we can address any crisis, including the housing crisis. We can build a province where everyone has a decent place to live, and no one gets left behind. And I really look forward to doing that work with you, and I really look forward to your questions. And I'm going to wrap up here so we have time to hear from you. Thanks very much.